Hello, hockey, basketball, and soccer fans. My name is David. I thought I would start this video at 1:41 on the afternoon of Sunday, 18th of June, 2023, North American Eastern Time, 5:42 the same afternoon, GMT. So, it's been a while since I've put out a video of any type. I believe the last one I did was on a train crash in eastern India. But this is more one of my typical videos of sports that I like to watch. I haven't paid a lot of attention to soccer other than Toronto FC in Major League Soccer is struggling to remain in a playoff spot. I'm not sure if it's in or out of one yet, but it has certainly been a very interesting season to say the least. Basketball front, the Raptors, after almost 2 months, hired Darko Rajakovic, a Serbian, as head coach. First, I think, European head coach of the Raptors ever. Or at least European-born. But again, it's finally, after a circus of, who's going to be head coach, finally done so. Hopefully, new Leaf GM Director Living won't take so long to find a head coach for that team as President and jury of the Raps did, Rajakovic, after the firing of Nick Nurse. The week after the Raps had lost a play-in game to the Chicago Bulls by a very close margin. I believe it was 109-105, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look at that. Well, there's been a lot of developments in the hockey world. Golden Knights having dispatched the Panthers in 5 games, including 9-3 in the 5th and final game of the Cup final. I was neutral as to which team should win the Cup. Both teams had compelling reasons to win the Stanley Cup. The Panthers had never won one, but had been in a Cup final in the 1990s, and then a Cinderella run that finally came to an end. But again, I congratulate the Panthers for having kept the streak alive of Florida teams qualifying for the Stanley Cup final out of the Eastern Conference, or at least a traditional Eastern Conference team in the case of Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2020-21 season. Yeah, 2020-21 season was kind of weird because of some playoff matchups before the Stanley Cup final having featured traditional Western and Eastern Conference teams playing each other. Well, Leafs were eliminated in the opening round, so it was just because the Leafs finished where they did in the North Division, All Canadian Division, and the Habs finished where they did. That was a traditional Eastern Conference matchup, but there was going to be a traditional Western Conference, traditional East-West. It was going to be a matchup between a traditional Eastern and traditional Western team, given the matchup. So, Leafs and Habs in one of the first round series, the Jets and Oilers in the other. The Jets and Habs won their respective series. So there was a traditional Western and Eastern matchup that's probably not going to happen for a very long time in the postseason, other than a Stanley Cup final. So it was kind of a missed opportunity for the Leafs. But what was not was winning a playoff series. Still nowhere near being Stanley Cup contenders. I thought the Leafs were going to lose again. But looking good. Then Kyle Dubas made a whole bunch of moves to try to toughen the team up. Those moves were not nearly enough to propel the Leafs into a conference final, but again, step was made. It was achingly slow. But again, progress is progress. Hopefully we can build on it, and hopefully that means that that at least one of Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, and William Nylander will be traded this offseason. Yes, a fly there. Hopefully that will be the case. And so Trey Living will understand this because of the lack of point production from those top players. Indeed, against the Panthers last month, Nylander scored this many goals on Panthers' main goalie Bobrovsky, Marner this many goals, Matthews and Tavares each this many goals. You can see there, not nearly enough. 3 goals from that core. And out of 10 goals scored in that series by the Leafs, 3 came from that core. And that's a problem. there needs to be scoring up and down the lineup. I'm not sure what changes Trilling will make, but with 10 unrestricted free agents, it's not going to be easy to replace them all. But we'll see what happens. So I have a little bit of optimism. At least we'll manage to at least get into a second round during their coming season. But unless they make a change to the core, I see, a conference final appearance as unlikely. So yeah, it's been rumors of buyouts. Been rumored of whether Matt Murray should be bought out of the last season of his contract. Ditto in the case of Oilers winger Yamamoto, the last season of his own contract. So last summer, the Oilers signed Yamo to 2 seasons with a per season cap hit of $3.1 million. And there's the problem with Yamo was that against Golden Knights last month, that second round playoff series, he didn't score even 1 goal. Indeed, by the 3 minutes, by the 17-minute mark of the first period of the 5th game of that series, which would be the last game of that series, or the 6th game of that series, and it would turn out to be the last game of the Oilers' entire season, he didn't score a goal after that. The Oilers by then had been up 2-1, but would end up going on to lose that game 5-2. So yeah, it's very interesting. Yamo had gone silent. So will the last season of Yamo contract be bought out? Well, we'll see what happens. But there's no doubt that he didn't do very well. It's really interesting to find out what happens to the Raptors after claimed by Fred VanVleet that he wouldn't exercise the final season option of his contract. And before I get to the buyout of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, thought I would do is go in terms of other developments involving Canadian teams from western to eastern Canada. Well, we'll have the Flames, so they have turnover in the front office. Craig Conroy is the new GM. I don't know if the head coach yet, but maybe head coach. I don't know. The Oilers. Well, we'll have to see. If there have been changes as well. It's hard to know how many changes there actually be. Winnipeg Jets. It's going to be interesting. Connor Hellebuck having claimed to have won it out. Pierre-Luc Dubois maybe saying au revoir, as he put it in his mother tongue. It's originally from Quebec, from the province of Quebec, and others as well. Who knows what's going to happen? Things are a mess over in Winnipeg, but we'll see what happens. But I'd say if there's an early prediction I can make, is that these Jets are going to, likely going to miss the 2024 Stanley Cup playoffs. There's just so much turnover, and that scoring slump in February gives me kind of a little bit of pause to say, oh, these Jets are going to make it in the postseason. They barely got in, and when they did, they kind of run out of gas by the 5th game of their first round series, and they were out. 4-1, hand pass by Blake Wheeler in an attempt to score goal number 2, meant no goal. What a downer. But yeah, there's no doubt turmoil in the Jets. Leafs are undergoing some changes, and we'll have to see what happens there. Senators have a new ownership group after over a year of the daughters of the late Eugene Melnyk having kind of split the ownership duties. So the transfer from the estate of Melnyk, the late Eugene Melnyk, to Michael Andlauer, I believe was, who's the investor group, now runs Senators. The Habs, let's see what happens to them. After all, it's not like I mean, it's not like they did. It's not like they did great during their most recent season, ending up in second last in their own conference, and dead last for the second straight season in their own division. It's going to be interesting to find out what the Habs do in the offseason. And what happened in the draft. I mean, Blackhawks will get to pick first, the Habs 5th, the Canucks will get to pick 11th, and the Leafs have a goalie with a modified no trade clause. So that means they may be able to move at least a part of Matt Murray's contract. Whether they'll end up doing so, we'll see what happens. But again, the buyout, the hit will be less, but in the second season of the buyout, the second of the 2 seasons of the buyout period, there will be a cap hit where there will otherwise not be one. But at least they have that option. The Canucks would have had to ask Oliver Ekman-Larsson, a defenseman who was selected 6th overall by the Coyotes in his draft year, doesn't have. At least not. The Canucks wouldn't have been able to move Ekman-Larsson without having asked his permission, or his agent's permission. But the Canucks won't be doing so because they bought out the last 4 seasons of his contract, and it's going to hurt in some of those seasons down the road. But after the cap is expected to have gone up, this coming season, the Canucks have a cap hit of just under $150,000 US. Won't that be good? More cap space. The question is whether the front office will blow that cap space on acquiring free agents who end up not helping their team get anywhere near a playoff spot, or at least help with this retool, get that team towards a more defensive minded mindset. I mean, keeping the puck out of their own net was a big problem this past season for the Canucks. Lots of games where they gave up at least this many goals, including a lot when they gave up at least this many. I mean, giving up 4 more goals is a recipe, more often than not, for disaster. And it was for the Canucks. And they ended up, in 6th in their own division, and over 10 points out of the nearest available playoff spot. That's not good. Yes, the Panthers finished in the second wildcard spot, and went on a rather Cinderella run. But problem is, Panthers were a wildcard team. So there's no guarantee the Canucks would have necessarily lasted beyond the first round of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs had they made it. I mean, I look at the Jets having missed the postseason during the 2021-22 season, but ending up just getting in this season. But they didn't even play like the Leafs against the Capitals during the 2017 Stanley Cup playoffs. Those Leafs kept things close in each of the games. Yes, the Leafs ended up losing in 6 games, but they kept things close. Closer than the Jets in that 5th game. Jets just gonna see what the Jets season was. Just gonna go to Winnipeg Jets for the last season. Well, for their most recent season here. Oh yeah, so I'm just gonna go to went to the ESPN website for the Jets, and so the postseason was so when the Jets scored at least 3 goals, they had a 1-1 record. But when they scored no more than 2, They went 0-3. And that was the biggest problem they had, scoring goals. 2 goals in Game 2, 2 in Game 4, and 1 in Game 5. It would have been 2 had it been... they would have scored 2 had it not been for a hand pass from Blake Wheeler off a face-off. But again, the hand pass showed how desperate the Jets had become to try to generate even a little bit of offense. But even if that goal had counted, it would turn up, a shot went past Laurent Brossoit. But if even the shot had counted, it would have been still likely a case of too little too late. Jets would have been behind 4-2. They ended up losing 4-1, so it wouldn't have mattered in the end. It would have mattered very little. They got closer, but still, teams that score at least this many goals end up winning games in the postseason. There are those tight games, but those Jets just effectively grounded. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to find out what the Jets do, where the Canucks go after the buyout of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, or OEL for short. But again, it's just been all this way here, and just reading now an interesting article on ESPN about the way too early edition for 2023-24. So let's have to see what happens. I haven't yet read the article. I look forward to reading it. Or at least I hadn't read the article. Hadn't finished reading the article. But I definitely look forward to doing so and see where ESPN ranks various teams. But if there's like a way too early prediction, it's these Jets ain't gonna make it into the 24-24 Stanley Cup playoffs. But I'm gonna go see how the rest of my afternoon goes, and I'm gonna say, go Leafs, go, and go Canada, go.